Mr. Duncan is now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And earlier you commended Ambassador Pickering and Admiral Mullen. I want to commend you and your staff for the very thorough way that you have attempted to get the full story of this Benghazi situation and incident. Let me just say this. Ever since some well-publicized embassy bombings in 1998 and then again after the events of 9/11, the Congress has approved whopping increases, many billions of extra and additional funding for embassy security around the world. Yet the ARB report found that, quote, Embassy Tripoli did not demonstrate strong and sustained advocacy with Washington for increased security for Special Mission Benghazi. I'd like to ask Ambassador Pickering or Admiral Mullen, how did you come to that conclusion? Were there specific documents that led you to that statement? Or
yes, Mr. Duncan, it was a combination of documents and the personal interviews with the people who made the recommendations.
All right. Admiral, okay.
No,
also,
I would agree with what what Ambassador Pickering said.
Your report says on page 4 that, quote, systematic failures and leadership and management deficiencies at senior levels within 2 bureaus of the State Department resulted in a special mission security posture that was inadequate for Benghazi and grossly inadequate to deal with the attack. What were the systematic failures and leadership that you're talking about in that statement?
Briefly, sir, a constant churn in personnel, including security personnel, with an average stay time in Benghazi of 40 days or less, and as well, differential and uncertain and in sometimes negative attitudes towards security physical improvements of the post are 2 examples.
I would add to that, sir, that the application of resources over time, whether it was from inside the security branch of the State Department or inside the buildings branch, the training of personnel before they went for the right kind of high-threat training, the physical upgrades that had been sought, and that because the rotations were occurring so quickly, the continuity of achieving those physical upgrades, the stovepipes that no leader, and we've focused on the key leaders in our report, saw fit to cross to make things happen from a leadership perspective. So there was an active interventionist kind of leadership, and we particularly focused on the people with the knowledge in security who actually were making the so it was as well as knowledge in the area. So that would be the NEA Bureau as well.
Well, you said the knowledge that was available, and several people in the chairman just talked about how that no one has been held accountable in the way that most American people would consider accountability in this situation. And Admiral Mullen, in your interview with the committee, you were asked about a man named Ray Maxwell, and you said nobody had the picture like he did.
Ray Maxwell was in a position in the NEA Bureau where his whole portfolio were these 4 countries in the Maghreb, including Libya. As was stated earlier, there was a tremendous amount of instability throughout the Middle East, not just the demonstrations, but clearly the evolution of what had happened in Egypt and Syria as well. So as you neck down, and you have the Assistant Secretary Jones, who's very focused on the whole region to include those crises, and you come down under her, the individual with, from my perspective, the focus, the knowledge, the portfolio, the day-to-day focus was Mr. Maxwell. And I was, quite frankly, taken back significantly that he had, from my perspective, removed himself from those responsibilities in terms of what was going on in Libya. I was shocked, actually, based on his interview.
I had to slip out briefly to another committee, and maybe you've already answered this, but were you surprised or shocked that he or any of these other 3 people, the top 4 that have been removed, that no one was fired?
We've talked about the constraints of the law, and those are very real constraints. And if I could, oftentimes this is equated, and you brought up the coal. So this gets equated to the military. So when we have a military commander that fails, we quote unquote fire them. What that really is, in essence, is we move him or her out of that job. They are not dismissed from the federal service unless you get into the criminal, unless they go through the criminal proceedings, and they are dismissed as a result of a court-martial. So there is this mismatch of the perception of you fire people in the military all the time. What you really do is you move them out of a job. They still are in the federal service.
So you don't fire them in the way they would be fired in the private sector,
where they are no longer part of the organization.
Right.
No,
all
sir.
Right. Thank you.
Would the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
Well, isn't it true